Okay, the presentation is called Baseball, How Movement and Mechanics Impact Your Health and Performance. A couple of facts. In 2021, there were more Major League Baseball pitchers on the disabled list than there were total NFL football players on injured reserve. And it was almost double. So there were almost twice as many just pitchers on the DL than there were total injuries in the National Football League, where someone is chasing you and trying to kill you. Another fact, less than 10% of Little Leaguers go on to play high school baseball. Quite an alarming fact. Can you imagine your baseball career being over at 12? So I think there's a few reasons for this. One, and it really all comes down to, there's really only one reason. I've broken up and I realize there's three reasons. I already see a four there. See, I already screwed up already. So kids play other sports like lacrosse. A lack of success or skill. We've all seen the kid who's 5'10", 5'11" when they're 12, hits 20 home runs and never seems to pan out in Babe Ruth or high school level. And the first is injury, right? The kids are injured. They get hurt throwing, arms, shoulders, and they don't want to play a sport that hurts. I can't solve the lacrosse thing. The other two are 100% solvable. It's just a matter of players, parents, coaches want to solve them. So how do we solve them? With better movement and mechanical skills. We're in an age now of social media. We can turn on social media and in every frame, we can see someone pimping something. For your hitters, we can see the battle between, I'll try to say this without cracking up, the high level pattern of hitting and all different kinds of hitting. There's hitters going back and forth. And there's all different kinds of mechanics or pitching training that's going back and forth. Movement and mechanics are skills that need to be taught and practiced every day. Okay, so you can't just, you have to start with movement first before we talk about any type of skill in any sport. So thank you for joining me today. Hopefully you guys would like to learn a couple new things. So first, who the heck am I? Thank you for coming in out to listen. Thank you for Coach Alex for setting this up. So my name is Dr. Kevin McGovern. I'm a physical therapist, strength and conditioning coach. I'm the inventor of GAME, which stands for Graded Active Movement Exam, which we'll learn about later in this presentation. That's a quantitative functional movement exam and predictor of future injury. I'm the founder and creator of my pitching program called Velocity RX. I have a book coming out called The Book on Movement, which should be done hopefully within the next 2 months. And I'm the owner of Perfect Motion Sports Therapy in Acton, Massachusetts. So my goal is to save 1 million arms. The pitching and just injury epidemic in baseball is literally insane. Please don't get off the call when I say this, but I am a diehard Yankee fan. I come from Southern Connecticut, even though I've been living in Massachusetts now over 30 years. And my team in the last 10 years has been absolutely decimated with preventable injuries. We currently have 4 frontline pitchers on the disabled list already this year, 3 pitchers and our center fielder, in injuries that are 1,000% preventable. The Yankees did not win the World Series last year after leading all of baseball in their record because their bullpen was decimated in the second half of the season with 4 Tommy John injuries and 1 elbow fracture from that BC kid whose name escapes me. A fracture, pitching. Insane. These are my cool logos. So movement is a skill, all right? It has to be taught correctly, duplicated, replicated. The more skills we have at basic movement, the better athlete we become and the less chance that we have for injury. I think a lot of skills, so why are there so many injuries? Because I kind of use the analogy, sports is in the penthouse of a building, right? It's nice up there. We got TVs, we have a hot tub, nice view. But basic movement is in the parking garage, right? No one really likes to practice that. But if we don't have a good foundation of our building, that building is coming down, all right? And injuries in the sport of baseball, I hate to be is a pandemic. It's insane how many injuries that there are in the sport of baseball. When you have 5 minutes, go look at the stats of Jim Palmer, baseball pitcher, through 300 innings, 5, 6, 7 years in a row, 20 complete games, 2, 3, 4 years in a row. I don't think there were 20 complete games in the entire American League last year. There is a problem. Movement is math. There is only one correct answer, okay? Those who are the better athletes can kind of circumvent bad movement, but there is only one correct way to move. So my game exam measures the initial sequence of human movement. It kind of was invented by chance about 20 years ago when I was looking for an exam to battle insurance companies who were cutting my patients off from much needed care, because all insurance companies really care about is if you're out of pain, but pain doesn't really measure function. So 20 years of trial and error, this exam not only is an evaluative tool, but it is also a predictor of injury, that I can look at a human being and depending on how they score on the exam, we could actually now predict that basic movement is off. And the more we continue to move like that, the more that we can predict that person is going to get injured. So if the movement is not correct, we're going to have an immediate lack of performance. That's easy. And if it stays incorrect, injury is highly probable. 90% of the injuries that I see have to do with poor basic movement in one manner or another. All injury to a greater or less extent has to do with dysfunction in the sequences of basic movement. Yes, even if you fall out of a tree and land on your head, I could tell you that, not that caused you to fall and land on your head, but no one moves correctly. I wouldn't have a job or a career if the human body moved correctly. The human body is an amazing tool. It can do amazing things, but it's a cheater. It will try to circumvent movement. It will try to save energy. It will cheat. The best cheaters are your professional athletes, meaning that they have an unbelievable ability to circumvent poor movement and make it look correct. The average human being does not, and that's where injuries occur. So all athletic skill must start with a mastery of the basic human movements that create that skill. To improve as a baseball player, you must improve your skills with such movements as, and here are my 3 big movements: scapular depression. So, Kevin, what the hell is scapular depression? Well, if we're sitting here now, we're probably kind of hunched over, maybe even looking at our phone, and our shoulders are starting at our earlobes. Well, if we take our shoulder blades and pull them down and back, That's scapular depression. Why is that important? Because as we lift our arm up, our shoulder blade, by the science of kinesiology, is supposed to drop down. So why is that important with throwing? We'll get to that, but we have alphabet soup, the T, the W, and the M, which violate the natural movement of kinesiology and scapular depression. Squatting. Okay, we've been told for years, in order to get down, we bend our knees first. Worst advice in human history. As soon as we bend our knees first and don't move our center or our pelvis back, we actually shut off our glutes, hamstrings, groin, and back extensors, cut the power in half. Balance. Okay, so many kids I see can't stand on one foot correctly to be able to pitch. And really one of the bigger principles is moving proximal to distal. For any moms on the line, I'm sure they remember their very, very first picture of their child, the very first one. That would be the 4-week or 6-week or 8-week ultrasound. In that picture, we saw this amoeba-looking thing with a head and a spinal cord, and that was Junior. We didn't see any arms or legs because they grow on and develop after. And that's how the body should move, from proximal, from the spinal cord, out to the extremities, or just like a house, from the fuse box out to the plug. So if we go to the lat pull down machine and we pull from our hand first, we have violated that movement principle, which essentially then causes a reverse kinesiology, and we're actually firing muscles in a reverse order. So again, scapular depression, the squat, and moving from the center. So you're going to have this ad nauseum on Saturday when I go to practice and show you how these three movements affect everything from swinging, base running, pitching, fielding, everything with these three movements. So on to pitching. So how did I get started with this Velocity RX? So I had a cup of coffee with the Northeastern University Huskies in fall ball and realized that I didn't throw 90, so they didn't like me very much. So I ended up playing in men's leagues, the Park League, the Intercity League, the Hockey League until I was 43 years old, believe it or not. But my story about this is kind of a long one, so I'll keep it short. So back in 2005, I started working with a minor league catcher in the Dodgers organization named Jeremy Booth. Those of you may know him. He is the owner of Future Stars, New Balance Future Stars. And he had this elbow injury, and the Dodgers told him he needed Tommy John surgery. So I worked with him about 6 weeks, and he went back and played another 5 years without having Tommy John surgery. We just changed his mechanics. So that work parlayed into a job with the now defunct Nashua Pride and manager Butch Hobson. So I spent 2006 and 2007 as their physical therapist and trainer. So they had a lot of pitchers that were saw major league time and were high draft picks. Actually, they had two pitchers who were drafted right behind each other at like 6 and 7 in 1997. Both, of course, are out of baseball with injuries. So your independent league has cast-offs, at least in the pitching department, of guys who are just injured. So I figured while I was up there, I might as well steal all of the the training manuals, because it's major leagues, right? They must have these great training manuals. So a few guys brought them in, and God is my witness, after going through them, I even sent someone to my colleagues that I was working with. And I would say 75% of the exercises that they were given to do, I would do exactly the opposite. Literally the opposite. They're doing shrugs, lateral raises with shoulder injuries. We just spoke about scapular depression. And that, I thought at the point, was a time that I needed to do something. Also in 2006 or 7, around that time, I fielded a ground ball during warm-ups as a first baseman and made that throw that happens all the time in baseball, the first to third throw. I don't think I've ever seen one in 45 years of watching baseball, but I felt this crunch in my elbow. And after an MRI revealed that I too tore my ulnar collateral ligament. So now I've got a whole bunch of reasons to really learn how to fix this problem. So I never got my elbow repaired. I went on to throw probably since that time, I don't know, 700-800 innings, because I taught myself how to throw without stressing my elbow. So that's the story of how this all came about. So if you have a bad hitting instructor, you hit 157, or you go 0 for 30 in the weekend tournament. If you have a bad pitching instructor, you could end up on the operating table. And 2 years ago, you could actually end up dead. There was a college pitcher, I believe it was 2 years ago or right before the pandemic, who actually died on the operating table because, not thanking this, the surgeon, but something happened with his heart. So anytime that you go in for surgery, you do sign waivers, you run the risk of something bad happening. And that player died. So I've had countless injuries to the elbow, to the growth plate. Last year I had 4 softball players, 4 gals now are getting injured because they're being trained in the same intensity or the same way. And some of the crazy stuff I see on the internet. So let's look at some pitching pictures. This is the classic M. Okay, now if we put a bat in this gentleman's hand, he just stepped in the bucket, right? We would never in a million years do anything from this position, right? We wouldn't hit a golf ball from there, meaning if we're just looking at his center, wouldn't strike a tennis ball like that. But somehow we've taught pitching that we're supposed to throw all of our weight forward and leave our arm back behind us and our palm down in a movement called pronation. You might have seen the video that I sent out. Now, we can't throw from pronation. It's impossible. So our arm has to supinate to be able to do that. But this is a classic M posture. You'll see this in, what's his face there from Washington. He's got this exact same arm path. Okay. If we took a moving x-ray right now, this guy's shoulder is impinging. He's having bone on tendon being in this position. For those of you sitting at home, just put your arms in this position and see how long you can leave it there comfortably. Not very long. Here's Clayton Kershaw, same thing. I highlighted this because he's dragging here his back foot, which is also a teach. I'm not sure why we'd want to go home with velocity and drag our back foot. That would be like taking off in a boat with still tied to the dock. Now, Kershaw's had arm and elbow injuries, okay, as you can see from that position, but he's also had back injuries. So it's going to be very hard to turn my belt buckle, which is pointing at us, with a foot that's dragging. So he's literally causing reverse torque to his own body. Here's my dreaded Yankees. I'm not even sure what person this is, some minor league guy, but this is close to correct, but still bad. Okay, we've got our front foot down. His back foot is off the rubber at least, but his arm is still way behind him. That means right now in this picture, if we look at his belt buckle, that has stopped. It can't rotate anymore. It stopped, and now you can see the tension on his forehand. So now all of that torque is coming through the elbow. So another sport that moves the same way as baseball, but has 0 injuries and can play every day, twice a day, 3 times a day for hours at a time, And that's a tennis player, right? The tennis person can serve all day long. They don't hurt their arm. Yeah, they make a little bit of tennis elbow, but those are usually for bad amateurs who have very tight strings or don't or have issues with vibration. But I mean, I followed tennis for a long time. I don't know of anyone that's had Tommy John surgery. And the reason why, and the key to all of this, is they actually throw with gravity, meaning they are accelerating their arm last in the kinetic chain. Your arm should move last, and whether you're pitching, throwing from third base, doesn't matter. And that throw should be with gravity, meaning my arm is past 12 o'clock and I'm throwing straight downhill. And that right there is the reason, the arm position, that 90% of all these injuries happen. And then we have this. I highlight this picture because it might be a two-seam grip, but that also might be an overhand curveball grip as well. I mean, this just looks painful just to look at. All right. And these injuries are all preventable by moving correctly. And when you see the solution of how simple it is, it will actually kind of blow your mind. So all of those represent poor arm path, which is, like I said, the root of all evil. And it's the number one predictor of arm injuries. I have a list written down since, I believe was since 2006, when I picked Brian Wilson, the reliever from the San Francisco Giants. I pick usually 2 or 3 guys every year by just looking at their mechanics of who I think is going to injure their elbow. The only person that has eluded me, but not anymore, is Chris Sale, who spent 2 years eluding me, even though I had predicted him back in 19. That guy just has incredible flexibility, but he also hasn't come back to pitch at all effectively because no one has changed those horrific mechanics that he has. So, which is an active box squirrel pitcher. What I mean by throw last, hopefully this moves if I press it. No, of course not. It's not going to move. But in those films, you'll see, and I can forward you out the email. You'll see him accelerating. You'll see that towel not accelerate until it's moving downhill. So for attending tonight, probably by now or sometime a little after 8, you're going to receive an email in your email box. Look in your spam. I'm running a couple of specials. I do a video pitching assessment where I take the video from the side, break it down on the software that I have, and identify all of the points that could cause injury and a little plan to fix it. Also, my game test. Now that's a much longer procedure that's done in person. We're running you through 7 or 8 tests, full health history, and going through everything. And you will leave knowing everything that's moving correctly in your body, incorrectly in your body, and a plan to fix it, and any issues that may be a predictor of future injury. So that's all I have for the presentation. If anyone would like questions, unmute yourself and ask away. And thank you very much for listening. No questions? Don't be shy. You can text them if you're shy, you can put them in the chat, and I'll answer them. You're welcome. Whoever texted that. All right, questions. Going once. Going twice. Going 3 times. So check your email box. And I will be I'll have to check with Coach as to what time I will be there on Saturday, but I will be there live demonstrating these principles so that you can see them in a live format. So I hope to see all of you on Saturday. Thank you for listening, and this is recorded, and I'll be sending that out as well. So thank you all, and see you Saturday.